This is where we want this. I just looked.
Yeah, I think we're just doing it last time. Yeah.
All right, well, good morning. Good morning. Oh, you're all there, and good morning to those who may be tuning in later or online there. We're glad you're all with us. Pastor Jim Beard here. You're in the class of 4 witnesses to the truth, right? If you're expecting, how to take care of children, you got to go talk to a colleague down the hall. And we're here for this study together, and we're into our 3rd week now. So we're going to ready to dive into more of the details of what each gospel has to say about the good news, or who they were sending the word about Jesus out to. During our first 2 weeks, we discovered that there are variations on the story. Even though they're all talking about the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus, they tell it a little differently because they have good news to share with the group that is in front of them. We came to realize that each gospel writer therefore has a unique way of telling it. And it's not like one is right and one is wrong. They're telling this to bring forth your soul's delight and understanding and encouragement along the way. It is good news for the people. Therefore, I know that most of you keep saying, oh, yes, I have tuned in. I watched the videos online. I was here last week. If you weren't, no worries. But here's a little thing to get us started in your table groups, okay? In order to refresh your memories, I would like you to share the following. Think back on last week's message about Mark, okay? Mark. What was happening in the world at that time, and in what ways did Mark bring good news to his people? Get your brains all warmed up here. What was Mark all about? What was happening? How did he bring good news? You've got 3 minutes to share in your table groups. Again, refresh your memories. We'll be right back.
Last week, Wednesday, all together to Sunday, the next day, depending upon.
Take about 30 seconds more, and then we'll come back together. All right, what do some of you remember from last week? What was happening in the world, or what was Mark saying? What was what ways did he bring good news? Just a few reminders. What did you talk about?
Yep. The time of the Great Fire in Rome.
There was the Great Fire in Rome, right? That was right here, 64 is when the fire broke up. Yep.
Which led to the persecution, but then they were scapegoating Christians who were being persecuted.
Right.
So he was writing really to the people who were persecuted.
That's true.
So he was kind of drilling down, not a lot of hearts and flowers.
There were not a lot of hearts and flowers because the people were being persecuted by Nero because they were blamed for the fire.
Right.
Thank you. Someone in the back and then over here. Was that you, Jane? Or no, she said, don't call on me. She says, I'm just enjoying my coffee. Why don't you? Someone else had their hand up over. Oh, you're emotionally. Come sit with me. Very hospitable. What else happened back then? Anything or kind of message? Yeah.
There was a lot of poverty. And he did not hesitate to tell the people in charge that they were wrong.
There you go. He has no love for the people in power. Is that what you're saying? That'd be very true. They are wrong and there was poverty. And that poverty is going to spill forward again, remember. The poverty was not in Rome, which is where we situated last time, but it was back in Jerusalem. But they got word of it and could sense this was not going well back in the homeland. So good. Well, Mark started off things, didn't he? He got the writing going. He was the first one with the gospel story to tell. It was a stark story, you remember. It was kind of the rebel is giving this witness to it regarding bravery, perseverance of their leader. You know, he's offering words of encouragement to them and hope. Gotta have hope. Hang on for those who likewise are going to need to be brave. You need to persevere because you are going to also be persecuted. No doubt about it. In Mark, you are going to be persecuted. And when you're persecuted, it is going to be in very heinous ways, very, very unpleasant, very torture-filled ways in Rome. And it's all because, like you said, the fire was blamed on them. Nero needed some group to scapegoat for it. 75% of the capital, you'll remember, was destroyed by that fire back then. Rumor had it that Nero started it himself. Oh dear. And therefore, they are called, these people in Mark's gospel, to be faithful, to hang on. And Jesus, well, Jesus was human just like them. And he suffered just like them. But his believers knew the secret truth that ultimately he overcame death and he will ultimately save them. Yeah, our Savior lives, did not die. And so what do we know about Matthew now? We're going to the next one. Matthew is on our timeline up here, the next writer. He needs also, we sort of set the backdrop, remember, of how we're looking at things. The backdrop tells us to how do we listen to what's going on. Now, I'll give you a few little things, though. Matthew is writes like a Jewish rabbi, okay? He writes like a Jewish rabbi. Therefore, he is a master of the rich story and interpretation on these ancient themes of Judaism, and he interprets them all afresh. I will tell you what's going on. Therefore, he is often called the teaching gospel because he was a wise and experienced teacher, like a rabbi would be. I mean, he is very much aware of and steeped in the Jewish law, the Torah, as it is called, and in all these traditions of the Jewish faith. He knows them hands down. He has been a leader of the Christ followers in Antioch. Now let's take a look. Antioch. Now Rome is over that way further. Here's Jerusalem, etc. Antioch is up here, kind of in the Asia Minor territory, just so you get the sense of the lay of the land here, shall we say. Antioch. We don't often talk a lot about Antioch, but it is the greatest city of Rome's Asian domain. It is also the third largest city of the Roman Empire. I found that to be interesting too. Oh, we're not going to some back roads, a little back place. We're going to Antioch. It's like we're going to Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, you name it. You know, one of the big places here again. His frame of reference is focused around issues happening in and around, though not so much further east. He's going to talk more about this whole section. Palestine, Jerusalem, and Asia Minor here. That's where his focus will be and his audience will be. Matthew is commonly believed to have been one of the original 12 disciples. And Matthew was known originally as, quiz time, what was he known as? The tax collector.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, he was that. So Interesting how this develops. So Matthew's gospel is written approximately 10 to 15 years after Mark's. As we see, it's sort of in the late 75 to 80 range there. Timing again is important, for there have been several new and significant world events taking place since Mark's gospel. Let's paint our picture, shall we? In the year 66, we hit on this last time, there is poverty, there is hunger, it's taken place in Jerusalem. And in the midst of all this, the Jews of Judea rebelled against their Roman masters. The buildup had actually been coming for quite some time. It's not like it suddenly broke out just as the spur of the moment. This has been building and building and building, and finally it erupts. It is estimated that 200,000 Jews died in uprisings against and punishments by the Roman authorities during the century leading up to the revolt. That's a lot of fighting. That's a lot of bloodshed. So I'll say that again, 200,000 Jews have died in the last century leading up to this. It's been building through all that time, but even in the last several years here, it's been building itself.
It was going on during Jesus's time on earth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not new. And in response to this latest uprising, our good old antagonist, Emperor Nero, dispatched an army under the generalship of Vespasian, if I'm saying that correct. I think that's his name. General Vespasian, he's got to go. He's going to restore order back there in Jerusalem. And so by the time you go forward, now let me add some pictures for you too. You got your place in Antioch. Oh yeah, this is coming. By year 68, resistance in the northern parts had been squelched, had brought under control again. Probably up near Matthew, Rome has contained things. Now Rome will turn all of their attention to the conquest of Jerusalem. Now it was the year 68. And later that same year, Emperor Nero dies by his own hand. There is a turnover in power. It actually creates a power vacuum for a while in Rome. And in the resulting chaos, okay, Vespasian becomes the next emperor. So he has to leave Jerusalem. He leaves it to his son Titus to continue the fighting. Oh, you can see the monarchies here all falling into place. And so now we have Titus attacking Jerusalem, and the Roman legions surrounded the city. Slowly began squeezing the life of the Jewish stronghold there. Though it has a strong wall, they didn't let up. It didn't just happen and end. Reminds me of wars these days too, where it goes on, goes on, goes on. We've just hit our second year anniversary, have we not, with the Ukraine and Russia, I think. So this is also a siege that's going to take its time. They can outlast the ones in Jerusalem, they believe, and well, they do. They eventually breach Jerusalem's outer walls, and then they began not just a quick sweep, they began this very systematic ransacking of the city. Neighborhood at a time, they would come and invade and have these battles. The assault culminated in the burning and destruction not only of these towns in Jerusalem now, but also of the Holy Temple. which served as the center of Judaism. That was in the year 7. War takes time. A Roman historian, remember, it's not just, oh, does the Bible say this? Who says this? You got Rome itself writing down history. Name of a man by the name of Josephus. He had actually acted as a mediator between Rome and the Jews for a while, and when negotiations failed, he sat back and he witnessed the siege and all the aftermath and all that went on, and he writes this. Jerusalem was so thoroughly laid even with the ground by those that dug it up to the foundation that there was left nothing to make those that came thither believe that Jerusalem had ever been inhabited. This was the end which Jerusalem came to by the madness of those who were for innovations. Well, that's one way to put it, isn't it? A city otherwise of great magnificence and of mighty fame among all mankind, and truly the very view itself was a melancholy thing, for those places which were adorned with trees and pleasant gardens were now become desolate country every way, and its trees were all cut down. Nor could any foreigner who had formerly seen Judea and the most beautiful suburbs of the city and now saw it as a desert, but lament and mourn sadly at so great a change, for the war had laid all signs of beauty quite to waste. In victory, the Romans slaughtered thousands more. Of those that they didn't kill, they spared some from death, and so thousands also were enslaved and sent off to toil in the mines of Egypt. Others were dispersed into the arenas throughout the empire to be butchered, as we saw last week again, for the amusement of the public, and the temple's relics, the sacred relics that were in the Holy of Holies, were taken to Rome, where they were displayed in celebration of the victory. Spoils of war were taken. Actually, the whole rebellion continued to sputter on for another 3 years, and was finally extinguished in 73. It just keeps going. And it finally ended with the fall of one of their mighty fortress strongholds. It was called Masada. On the top of a mountain, the Jews had created this. Again, that was a long siege, but when you get trapped here also, even though you're safe. There's great stories about what happened in Masada too. I won't go into it, but you can just see that the route here is not easy. And yet Rome prevailed. By 73, all this came to an end. And so in the year 73, in the end, Rome abolished Judea as a homeland for the Jews. This is not your homeland anymore. You are all out of here. And so some Christians saw this is like they did in Rome with the fire. They thought, God is punishing them. How nice, so to speak. But the laying on of wrath, condemnation, see what you deserved, was thick and heavy. It's no wonder that some of the Jews actually put into their synagogue a liturgy or liturgies denouncing Christians at this time. They were not getting closer by any means. So yeah, Rome abolishes Judea as a homeland of the Jews. It's gone. I don't think we 21st century Western Christians fully appreciate what that is or feels like. The devastating impact of this destruction of their town and their temple. You got to think about that for a moment, way back if you were in the first century. This was the land that, remember, the whole history has said, this is the land that God promised to us. This was the promised land. This was the temple, the very place where God Almighty intersected with humanity on earth. The high priest, the highest of high priests, could only go into this holy of holy places to be at this altar once a year. It was so holy, you didn't dare go there. And to have this bedrock of their faith, their land, their temple, so utterly desecrated, utterly destroyed, it must have sent shockwaves throughout the whole system. It wasn't just a local issue. This was going to ripple through all of the Jews, all of them near and far. And so about 10 years after, the cataclysmic event, some 300 miles north of Jerusalem in the thriving city of Antioch, there's Matthew and his group and their Jewish survivors struggling to move forward. It might have been easier if the Jews and the adherents of Jesus it would have been easier if they weren't worshiping together, but they still were. They weren't two separate groups yet. They were still working this out and they're not agreeing on things. And in many places, they were still side by side arguing about things. Creates all sorts of struggles, of course, of what does this mean? What is acceptable? What does God want of us? What's no longer necessary? And there is just a lot of debate going on. Therefore, they're not only reeling about the loss of their temple, the loss of their promised land, they're also reeling over trying to make sense and understand, what is God doing? What does all this mean? The Pharisees and the Jewish Christians are basically competing for the hearts and minds and understanding of the religious community regarding what has happened and where are we going? What is going on? I'll let you know, this is what leads to church splits. Okay, we understand it, don't we? If you don't understand it, just think back. We've had our own witnesses of ourselves, like what are we fighting over? We're fighting over women's rights, we're fighting over the rights of minorities, we're fighting currently over the rights of gays and lesbians, we're fighting over all these things, and then we split. Well, yeah, that's what's the turmoil that is also happening at this time. Issues before the church in the years following the destruction of the temple, it's the same kind of, what is this? No, yes, no, yes. It's this disagreement. What is right? What is wrong? What does God expect of us? What should we believe? What should we believe? And so there's uncertainty and there's anger and there's suspicion, even in-house. There's turmoil and anxiousness without, but there's turmoil and anxiousness and fighting within as well. Okay, so now that's just a quick little summary, but I think you need the volatility to get to with Matthew. It is the backdrop for Matthew's good news to come shining through. See, I believe Matthew is writing in the wake of all this monumental destruction and all of this theological disruption and all this house fighting, whereas Mark, okay, Mark writes to fellow believers who are being persecuted. Matthew writes now to the remnant that remains, that are still alive, and that are the outlying Jews. They're not at home, that they're few and far between, who are living in basically an attitude of defeat and moralism and demoralization and despair. I picture his gospel is meant to be like a life ring that I'm going to throw out to you who are drowning. Let me help you. Let me give you the answer. Are you not seeing this? Is what he is saying. Is it still us? These are like my cousins. Maybe it's not my immediate family because I'm following Jesus, but you're still family and we're fighting over this, and I still feel your pain. Let me throw you a life ring of what's happening. I think this is what's happening, says Matthew, the teacher, rabbi. Matthew longs to teach them that all is not lost. All is not lost. No, no. Guess what? Jesus, this one called Jesus, is actually the Messiah that we have been praying for and praying for and praying for how many centuries? So friends, if you're open to listening, Matthew's ready to tell you. Matthew's going to lovingly share. He'll even debate with you what is going on. Let's talk about the Torah together. Let me explain what's going on so you can be of good hope and cheer. I mean, if anyone needed to hear hope and cheer, this group needed it too. These Jews needed it. So in the wake of all of those things, a time of political unrest, economic distress, and religious crisis, here he comes. Picks up the quill and the papyrus or whatever he is writing on. He writes his statement of faith, as we have said. Here's what I believe. And he picks up where Mark leaves off, picks up a lot of things Mark has already said, starts passing on the good news to this crowd who are living without a spiritual center, without a spiritual hope, without understanding, and no homeland at all. It's time to instruct the people in a new understanding, in a new faithful ways of following God. And so, like a good rabbi, Matthew seeks to present his interpretation with solid evidence and concrete instruction. Just going to pause before we get into verse by verse. Any questions so far? Comments? No one's falling asleep, so that's a good thing for me. Maybe they are online. Wake up, Bill. But no, we're glad you're all engaged here. There'll be a few things to look at together in just a second. So, chief among the issues that Matthew has to address, he has to first address is Jesus's authority. Synagogues are, and those leaders, they're challenging this. Why are we supposed to listen to this backwater Galilean, for heaven's sakes, from Nazareth? We're not going to. What makes him think he can speak to these things? So Matthew starts right there, sets out to witness to his kinfolks about who is Jesus. Let me tell you, Matthew refers to ancient prophecies, and guess what? They're being fulfilled all over the place. Look back at our scripture, look back at our Torah. It says this is going to happen. Here it is. He's going to refer to those ancient things 15 times. A third of them are going to be in the first 4 chapters alone. Bam, 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 bam. This is who he is. And of course, we've already covered a little bit about this, but his lineage, remember? Yeah, look at where he comes from. He's got the right pedigree. It's important to this community. And so Matthew starts with Jesus's family tree. It proves that Jesus is firmly anchored in the descendants of both Abraham, which was one group's That's what they went back to, but also King David, which is where another group really put a lot of their emphasis. And yet Matthew says, you know what? That's great that he's anchored there. Look, there's the proof he's all right there, but it's not upon lineage that one should rely. Here's where he starts talking. Here's chapter 3, Matthew says, yeah, but don't think you can say to yourselves, oh, we have Abraham as our father. I tell you that out of these stones, destruction, shall we say, of Jerusalem, out of these stones, God can raise up children for Abraham. The axe is already at the root of the trees. Usually that's a religion, the Jesse tree, the family there. And every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, Matthew argues, even though Jesus is without a doubt the kingly descendant of Abraham and David through and through, there's nothing which would prevent God from carrying forth with a whole new group of people in the future. And if you happen to be a Jew who leans more towards this group, if you like Moses more, he's going to lay out a whole comparison for you here in these opening chapters. He's going to address their questions of authority. He really depicts Jesus kind of as like a new Moses. Why do I say that? Because he keeps drawing these parallels. He keeps alluding to things that we know is Moses' story. They're part of the Jewish tradition. He doesn't need to say it directly, but he'll just tell you the story. Oh, the baby Moses was hidden from Pharaoh, just as Jesus was hidden from Herod. Moses came out of Egypt. According to Matthew, so did Jesus. Moses wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Jesus is going to wander in the wild in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. And from Mount Sinai, Moses delivered the law. And from another mountain, Jesus delivered the Sermon on the Mount. On the mountain. Do not think that I have come to abolish all these things, Jesus says. I have not come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Oh yeah, I'm not throwing out the sacred past. I am making it real and fulfilled, all these things. He's not proposing that Jesus is something new to follow, to replace all the revered items of the past, the law, the prophets. Jesus is ultimately fulfilling them all. And then Jesus takes it even further. And Jesus says, for I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh, challenging words for sure. Jesus takes the laws of Moses and takes them another step further. And on this Sermon on the Mount, he does it in this repeated fashion, insisting on more and more from his followers. It reads something like this. You have heard that it was said, for those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable for judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you are liable to judgment. You're going to find this pattern. You heard that it was said, but I say, here and here and here and here and here and here. My Bible has it word for word. Exactly the same. Don't miss the pattern. I'm taking what has been your law, and I'm going to even take it a step further. More than the law, don't even get angry at your brother and sister. Mine is the law of love. Mine is taking this further than just thou shalt not. Yeah. Jesus delivers 5 different sermons of this sort in Matthew, which in a way parallels, the scholars will say, the 5 books of the Torah from Moses. And then after his resurrection, Jesus gives the Great Commission. And once again, It's on a mountaintop. And both the believers and the doubters are included. Last chapter. And then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, this is after his resurrection, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted, like maybe the Jews who are still not sure about things. And then Jesus came to them and said, need we emphasize it one more time, all the way to the end. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. From the chapter 1 to chapter 28, he has established his authority again and again. Oh, yeah. And so the debate goes on and they argue and try to figure it out. And part of their argument that the Jews will still keep raising is like, isn't the long-awaited Messiah to be a warrior? A warrior like David himself was the great King David. That's what we're looking for. A warrior that looks like he's ready to go into battle for us and lead the people in battle against these military forces that they are battling. We're oppressing them, controlling them, kicking them out of their holy land. And Matthew argues, I dare say, he's sort of going, well, perhaps, but what if the coming age of and the coming reign of God, the kingdom to come that we keep hoping for, what if it was not meant to be envisioned militaristically, let's put it, nationalistically, is that a word? I don't know. Not by revolution, maybe is what he's saying. Why are we picturing that it's against military powers of our day? That has not been working. What if it wasn't supposed to be about the sword? Maybe it's supposed to look like rather it's coming like it is in heaven. And so Matthew lays forth, like a good rabbi, a new interpretation of what God is doing, new visions of what this means, new expectations, this is what this is about. This is what the Messiah is about. So what I want you to do at this point, I want you to, if you've got a Bible, try turning to chapter 26 of Matthew. And get all the way down to the 50th verse, 50 to 56. This should be a scene in which he's about to be arrested, I believe, before he gets hauled off, which we're going to look at also in just a second. Somebody got it there? Okay. In your table groups, just take a minute or two to read through 50 to 56 and just notice things that are there that we've already talked about. Okay. And then talk about it with your table groups for another 2 minutes. Okay. We'll be back.
All sustainable sense.
So what are some observations your tables are coming up with? What are you noticing? What's,
This is the way the scripture is fulfilled.
this is the way scriptures are fulfilled. And how is it with, say that again? Oh, talking amongst themselves, okay. How is this gonna come play itself out? Someone tell me what the storyline is. What's happening in 50 to 56? What's that? Don't rebel. Isn't this the part where they're about to arrest him? Someone grabs a sword, lops off their ear. Isn't that is that all what you're reading? And what does Jesus say? Good for you. Let's all grab swords and kill him. What are you doing? Put this away. This is not the way. But shouldn't the Messiah look like that? With the sword in hand? Apparently not. Maybe we got that part wrong. Maybe the Savior, the Messiah looks like this. Giving up everything in love for all of you. Almost the opposite of the warrior image. Put your swords away. What are you thinking? I feel Matthew's compassion underneath all this. It's like, how many years are we going to have bloodshed? It's centuries with hundreds of thousands of people bleeding to death. Our people have fought and died against military powers forever. They're just too great for us. I sense this in Matthew's writing. How much blood has been spilled? How much more is yet to be spilled? Dear friends, there's another way. Another way to live out God's promises. Everything points to Jesus for those who will listen and who will trust him and who will obey his teachings. Matthew's words are always rather direct. Here's the lesson. Here's the lesson. They're very clear, but they can also be subtle. They can also be implied. So we're going to turn again to that scene that's found in all four of the Gospels. It is the trial scene of Jesus before Pilate and before the crowd. It is found in Matthew 27. You just keep your finger on that part. We won't read it verse for verse, but Jesus is telling, Mark's telling. We realized it contained a lot of violence and contained a lot of mocking. Matthew's telling will have those too. Okay, those are almost verbatim. He's going to copy Mark in many ways there, but then we're going to skip over to the parts where he doesn't follow Mark. I want you to listen carefully for what Mark adds. Matthew adds, excuse me, what Matthew adds to Mark's account. And you can just sort of close your eyes and take it in if you want, or just jot a few notes. What is he adding? Here's how Matthew puts it. Now, at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd. I'm starting at verse 15, by the way, and anyone whom they wanted. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who's called the Messiah? Note the title. For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. And while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, have nothing to do with this innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream of him. I'll just interject there. Notice how angels keep coming in dreams, bringing messages. Angels were the messengers of God, you see. And they're instructing and instructing over and over again in Matthew, from the dreams of Joseph before Jesus was born, to the dreams of the three magi who were told not to return via the same route, all the way to the dreams of the wife of a pagan named Pontius Pilate. God is sending messages to his people. And then it goes on to say, and now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. And the governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release to you? Just make it clear. Let's not get this wrong. Let's ask it again. Which one? And they said, Barabbas. And Pilate said to them, then what should I do with Jesus, who's called the Messiah? The Messiah. Let's note the title again. And all of them said, let him be crucified. And then he asked, why? What evil has he done? Oh, but they shouted all the more, let him be crucified. And then, so when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. And then the people as a whole answered. I think we got one more slide. Yep. And then the people as a whole answered, his blood be on us and on our children. Note that sentence right there. And so he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. So in this telling of this trial scene, Matthew's emphasis is quite clear, is it not? The Romans proclaim him again and again to be innocent. So quit blaming everything on the Romans. Quit blaming Jesus's death on them. They're innocent of this. You have no one to blame but yourselves. And now indeed, his blood is on you, on your children, ramping forward. Backdrop of blood of the children is spilled again and again and again. Just leave your old understanding of the Messiah behind it. He's this warrior. Matthew has steered his readers with the skill of a master rabbi to this climactic moment, and they are now ready to hear. This is us and his final commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We almost know this too well. And teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. But let's pause and just look at that carefully. Now, Matthew's great commandment emphasizes, what is it not emphasizing? There's one way to look at this too. It's not really emphasizing, go out and convert all of the Gentiles. It's not saying, go out, take up your sword and fight, fight, fight. It's not saying you're all about to die because you're being persecuted. What is this final word about? It is to instruct everyone. Go therefore and make disciples. Making disciple is a long process. We are making disciples right here. It didn't happen in one session. I'm not sure where to get it there in 6, but you know what I'm saying. It takes time, it takes instruction, it takes teaching, it takes adapting what's going on. Yeah. Go make disciples, go make followers of Jesus in what they do and think and how they live it. Teaching them Obey everything I'm telling you. This is, make sure they're doing it. And the charge is to bring everyone into this community through faith, through baptism. Baptism, a holy cleansing ritual, which in that day was really a rite of initiation for adults after a long and lengthy period of study and commitment. That's when baptisms often took place. We here in United Methodist worlds, we reappropriated that to go, we're to claim God's joy and goodness and blessing, even on the tiniest baby who has no idea what's going on. That's called grace. But that baby has to grow up with all of our help to own it for themselves at a place called confirmation. They just have this switched on a little bit here. It's like, you confirm your faith, baptize them, bring them into the fold, so to speak. That's what's going on. Interesting commandment at the end. Go forth, make disciples, teach them, baptize them, have them obey everything that I've said, says Jesus. I'll be with you. I will be with you all the way to the end. And so, what about us? Well, when things in your life seem the most chaotic, most unstable, those may be the best times to reread the Gospel of Matthew again. You may have only yourselves to blame. But the good news is that Christ died for you anyway. Perhaps it's when things look their worst, those are the times you need a new perspective on what God is doing, what God is promising. When your world is crashing to pieces like Jerusalem did, and your faith and the bedrock that you were standing upon seems to be all turned upside down and non-existent, here is the solid, good news to focus on in Matthew. Jesus is the one who is our King, the anointed one, which means the Messiah. This is the one. This is the one. This is the one you've been waiting for. Then you can go with a heart back to your neighbors and to your work and anywhere else. Go with a heart full of God for the world. Just learn to follow and obey this new way that Christ is teaching. Exceed what the law is, keep exceeding it. That's what a life well lived looks like. Christ is going to go with us. And the good news is that you don't have to wait anymore for the Messiah to come. The Messiah is here. The Messiah has come. Take 3 minutes again, jot yourself some notes about what you don't want to forget about what you heard today. We'll check in on a couple who might want to share, and then we'll let you know what's coming up next week. But take 3 minutes for yourself to jot down what were some highlights I want to remember from today's class. So we overlay our backdrop with these sentences from Matthew. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill. You have heard that it was said, but I say, exceed that. Go even further. It is Matthew who says, I am innocent of this man's blood, Pontius Pilate says. It's your responsibility. And all the people answered, his blood is on us and on our children. And the final words, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing, teaching them to obey. Well, what's just one or two of what your takeaways have been?
Not by might, but with love. But any we face, whether it's being faced these times or in our current lives, is about love.
There we go. Not by might, put your sword away. Yeah, Sylvia.
In the same passage, a lot of it was about like, stop trying to do this on your own, like, do not trust it, like, my father, you know. He's in control of it, like, stop
Trying to do it on your own. My father's in control. There you go. Thanks. One more? Yeah, Mary.
It seems to me that Matthew is encouraging the Jews and potential Christians he hopes to make out of the Jews after the destruction. So the people are in need of encouragement. And I think he's trying to do that.
The people are in need of encouragement. He's really trying to give them a way through this chaotic time. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Good news. Good news indeed. Okay, go ahead, Jane.
Well, yeah, when I was working as a nurse, you used to have a saying when you walk into a disaster, to take your own pulse first. To get your place into that place of calm where you can see more quickly and act more logically. And I have two children who grew up in this church, but do not attend church. And the older one is married and has children, and will talk to me about discipline. And every time he'll say, what do you think we should do? And I say, I don't know what you should do, but I know what you should do first. First, put your hand on your chest and your abdomen and take your own pulse and take some deep breaths and remember that you love these children more than you love yourself. And that you're there to guide them, not to condemn them or persecute them, you know. And so, and he'll laugh and say, yeah, I have to do that all the time. And I said, share that with your wife too, because she gets really, you know, she's hounded by it all day and night, you know, and so.
Right.
Because I said, if you start with that, you will calm your mind to find a solution that it really comes from your own child. What do they need? Not what do you think they should do, but what do they need? And I feel that that's the message of this.
That's the feeling you get from Matthew.
Absolutely.
Take care of yourself. Yeah. So
this is
you can see you got the first audience was inside crowd, persecuted Christians. Second group, Matthew is writing to an inside crowd, the displaced Jews. Next week, we go to a different crowd, the sophisticated Greek audience, Roman audience to whom Luke writes. Luke is going to come along. They have to be reassured beyond doubt that Christians are no threat. Yeah, prior to this, Christians have been under a lot of suspicion. Paul's been under arrest. Jesus himself was suspected of subversion, and the sect's language of hope is notorious for its revolutionary tone. Oh, who are they? Can Christianity really be trusted? Next week, we have Luke's sensitive outreach. We'll see you then. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.